The sound of gunfire echoed across the Riverside Police Academy training range, but it wasn't the steady, controlled rhythm of expert marksmanship. Instead, it was the rapid, desperate staccato that instructors dreaded hearing, the sound of someone emptying their magazine in panic, hoping at least one bullet would find its target. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Salvador lowered her service weapon, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the paper target 25 yards downrange. 7 shots fired. 0 hits on the silhouette. The target fluttered mockingly in the morning breeze, completely untouched except for a few wild holes scattered in the dirt backdrop behind it. "Salvador!" barked Sergeant Mike Harrison, the lead firearms instructor whose voice could cut through. "Steele, what the hell was that? You just wasted 7 rounds of department ammunition shooting at ghosts." Elena's cheeks burned with embarrassment as snickers rippled through the line of cadets behind her. She was 3 months into the police academy program, and every trip to the firing range ended the same way: humiliation, disappointment, and the growing certainty that she might not make it through graduation. "Sorry, Sergeant," Elena replied, her voice barely audible over the protective earmuffs worn by the other cadets. "I thought I had the sight picture correct." Harrison walked over to Elena's position, his weathered face showing the kind of exasperation that came from 25 years of trying to teach nervous recruits how to shoot straight. Behind him, Elena could see the other cadets in her class hall. 23 of them watching with varying degrees of amusement and secondhand embarrassment. "Thought isn't good enough, Salvador," Harrison said, his voice carrying across the range. "In 6 months, you're going to be on the street with real criminals shooting real bullets back at you. You think 'thought I had it right' is going to save your life or your partner's life." Elena's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact with the instructor. She'd learned early in the academy that looking away or showing weakness only made things worse. "No, Sergeant. I'll do better." "Do better?" Harrison's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Salvador, at this rate, you're going to fail weapons qualification. So badly they'll have to invent new categories of failure just for you." The comment drew open laughter from several cadets, particularly from a group clustered around Brad Mitchell, a former military police officer who had made it clear from day one that he considered civilian recruits inferior. Mitchell was everything. Elena wasn't tall, confident, and blessed with natural shooting ability that made him Harrison's favorite student. "Maybe she should stick to traffic citations," Mitchell called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can't miss a parked car, right?" More laughter. Elena felt her face grow even hotter, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned to do that too, how to absorb humiliation without giving her tormentors the satisfaction of seeing her break. What none of them knew, what Elena had never told anyone at the academy, was that she had a master's degree in physics from Stanford University. Before deciding to pursue law enforcement, she'd spent 4 years working as a ballistics consultant for a private forensics company, analyzing bullet trajectories, calculating impact velocities, and testifying in court cases about the scientific aspects of shooting incidents. She understood the mathematics of marksmanship better than anyone on that range. She could calculate windage adjustments, explain the physics of bullet drop over distance, and analyze the harmonic vibrations that affected barrel accuracy. What she couldn't do, apparently, was apply that knowledge when she had a gun in her hands and instructors screaming at her. Elena had joined the police academy for reasons that had nothing to do with proving herself to people like Brad Mitchell or Sergeant Harrison. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she'd watched her younger brother Carlos get pulled deeper into gang activity, despite her family's desperate attempts to keep him on the right path. Carlos had been shot and killed in a drive by shooting when Elena was finishing graduate school, a case that remained unsolved, because witnesses were too afraid to come forward and the investigating officers seemed more interested in closing files than finding justice. She decided that night, sitting in a hospital waiting room while her mother cried over Carlos's body, that she would become the kind of police officer her community needed. Someone who understood the science behind the investigation, who wouldn't give up when cases got complicated, and who could bridge the gap between the laboratory and the street. But first, she had to learn how to shoot. "All right, everyone, listen. Up," Harrison announced, his voice cutting through Elena's memories. "We're going to run the qualification course one more time before lunch. This is your last chance to post a passing score before the monthly evaluation next week." Elena's stomach dropped. The monthly evaluation was a formal assessment that determined whether cadets were progressing adequately or needed additional training. Failing it meant extra remedial instruction, makeup sessions, and the very real possibility of being dropped from the program entirely. She watched as the other cadets prepared for their turns at the qualification course at timed shooting, exercise that required hitting specific zones on a target from multiple distances and positions. Mitchell stepped up to the line first, his movements smooth and confident. He drew his weapon, acquired his sight picture, and methodically placed all 15 rounds in the center mass area of the target. Perfect score. "Outstanding, Mitchell," Harrison called out. "That's how it's done, people. Smooth, controlled, professional." One by one, the other cadets took their turns. Most scored well enough to pass. A few struggled but managed to achieve the minimum qualifying score. And then it was Elena's turn. She approached the firing line with her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Her palms were sweating inside her shooting gloves, and despite hours of practice with her stance and grip, nothing felt natural or comfortable. "Begin when ready," Harrison announced. Starting his stopwatch, Elena drew her weapon and tried to remember everything she'd been taught. Firm grip with the shooting hand, support hand wrapped around, lean slightly forward, line up the front sight with the rear sight. Focus on the front sight. Control your breathing. Squeeze the trigger straight back. The first shot went high and to the right. The second shot went low and to the left. By the fifth shot, Elena could hear Mitchell and his friends making jokes behind her, their voices carrying despite the ear protection everyone wore. "Spray and pray," Mitchell said, just loud enough for Elena to hear. "That's all she knows how to do. Just close your eyes and spray bullets everywhere, and pray one of them hits something important." The nickname stuck immediately. Elena could hear other cadets picking it up, whispering it as she continued to struggle through the qualification course. Spray and pray Salvador. It was cruel, it was unfair, and it was becoming her identity at the academy. She finished the course with a score of 43 out of 100, well below the passing mark of 70. "Salvador," Harrison said as she secured her weapon and stepped back from the line. "See me after class. We need to talk." The rest of the afternoon's training session passed in a blur. Elena went through the motions of defensive tactics training, emergency vehicle operations, and legal procedures instruction, but her mind kept returning to those 15 missed shots and the humiliation of being labeled spray and pray girl in front of her entire class. After the final session ended and the other cadets had departed for their various off-duty activities, Elena made her way to Harrison's office in the academy's administrative building. The sergeant was waiting for her, sitting behind a desk covered with paperwork and training manuals. "Close the door and have a seat," Harrison said, his tone more serious than hostile now. Elena sat down in the metal chair across from his desk, her academy uniform still damp with perspiration from the afternoon's training. She waited for him to speak, knowing that anything she said in her defense would only make things worse. "Salvador," Harrison began, "I'm going to be straight with you. Your shooting scores are the worst I've seen in 15 years of teaching at this academy. You're averaging 35% accuracy on the range, which means you're missing 2 out of every 3 shots you fire. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Here's the thing, Harrison continued. Everything else about your academy performance is exemplary. Your written test scores are the highest in your class. Your physical fitness ratings are above average. Your scenarios and role-playing exercises show good judgment and decision-making skills. But none of that matters if you can't hit what you're aiming at. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that had seen hundreds of recruits struggle with various aspects of police training. The department has invested significant time and money in your training, Salvador. But there comes a point where we have to make a practical decision about whether continued investment is worthwhile. You're approaching that point. Elena finally found her voice. What are you saying, Sergeant? I'm saying you have exactly 2 weeks until the final weapons qualification exam. If you don't achieve a passing score of 70% or better, you'll be dismissed from the academy. No appeals, no second chances, no alternative assignments. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. 2 weeks. 14 days to overcome 3 months of failure and humiliation. 14 days to prove that she belonged in law enforcement, despite being unable to perform what many considered the most basic skill required of a police officer. However, Harrison continued, I'm not going to just send you out there to fail. The Academy has a policy of providing additional training resources for cadets who are struggling with specific skills. I'm assigning you to extra range time with our specialist instructor. Elena felt a flicker of hope. A specialist instructor? Detective Sarah Chun from our tactical unit. She runs advanced marksmanship training for our SWAT officers and investigative teams. She's agreed to work with you on her own time, evenings and weekends, to see if we can turn this situation around. Harrison pulled a business card from his desk drawer and handed it to Elena. Chun has a reputation for being tough but fair. She's also the best shot in the department, possibly the best shot I've ever seen. If anyone can help you figure out what's going wrong, it's her. Elena took the card, reading the name and contact information printed in simple black letters. Detective Sarah Chun, Tactical Operations Division. Thank you, Sergeant, Elena said. I won't waste this opportunity. See that you don't, Harrison replied. Because, Salvador, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about giving you false hope or making you feel better about yourself. This is about determining once and for all whether you have what it takes to be a police officer. In 2 weeks, you'll either prove that you can overcome your limitations, or you'll prove that some people just aren't cut out for this job. As Elena left Harrison's office and walked across the academy parking lot toward her car, she could hear the echo of gunfire from the range where evening training sessions were taking place. The sound that had once filled her with excitement about her chosen career now filled her with dread and anxiety. She sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine, staring at Detective Chun's business card and thinking about the phone call she would have to make. 2 weeks to transform herself from spray and pray girl into someone capable of protecting and serving the community. She wanted to help. 2 weeks to prove that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person who refuses to give up. Elena started her car and drove home, already planning the conversation she would have with Detective Chen. She didn't know if 2 weeks would be enough time to overcome months of failure, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to quit without a fight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena arrived at the academy the next morning 30 minutes early, hoping to avoid the usual crowd of cadets who gathered in the parking lot to joke and socialize before classes began. She'd spent most of the previous evening staring at Detective Chun's business card, rehearsing what she would say when she called, but ultimately deciding to wait until after morning training to make contact. As she walked toward the main building, She could hear voices from the outdoor physical training area, where some of the early arrivals were already working out. The conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed her approach. "Well, well," came Brad Mitchell's voice, carrying that particular tone of mock friendliness that Elena had learned to dread. "If it isn't our resident sharpshooter. How many targets did you assassinate in your dreams last night, Salvador?" The group around Mitchell erupted in laughter. Elena recognized most of them. Danny Pierce, a former security guard who considered himself Mitchell's second-in-command. Jessica Walsh, whose father was a police captain and who never let anyone forget it. And Tommy Ritchie, who had failed the academy once before and was desperately trying to prove himself the second time around. Maybe she was practicing her spray pattern, Pierce added, mimicking an exaggerated shooting stance. "You know, close your eyes, pull the trigger fast, and hope for the best." Elena kept walking, determined not to give them the reaction they were looking for, but Mitchell wasn't finished. "Hey, Salvador," he called out, his voice now loud enough to attract attention from other cadets arriving from morning formation. "I heard Harrison's making you get remedial training. That true?" Elena stopped walking but didn't turn around. Every instinct told her to keep moving, to avoid the confrontation, but something in Mitchell's tone suggested he wasn't going to let this go. "I heard they're bringing in some specialist to babysit you," Mitchell continued, walking closer until he was standing directly behind her. "Must be nice having the department waste resources on someone who obviously doesn't belong here." This time Elena did turn around, facing Mitchell and his group with what she hoped was a calm expression. "Everyone needs different types of training, Mitchell. That's why we're here to learn." "Different types of training?" Mitchell laughed. But there was an edge to it now. "Salvador, there's a difference between learning and being fundamentally incapable. You've been here 3 months and you still shoot like someone having a seizure." Jessica Walsh stepped forward, her expression carrying the kind of condescending sympathy that Elena found even more irritating than outright hostility. "Elena, maybe Mitchell has a point. I mean, police work isn't for everyone. There's no shame in realizing you're better suited for something else." "Like what?" Pierce chimed in. "Maybe she could be a crossing guard. Can't miss a stop sign, right?" The laughter that followed was louder now, drawing attention from other groups of cadets scattered around the training area. Elena could feel more eyes turning toward them, could sense the crowd gathering to witness what was becoming a public humiliation. "You know what I don't understand," Tommy Ritchie said, his voice carrying the particular cruelty of someone who had been on the receiving end of similar treatment during his first failed attempt at the academy. "How did you even make it through the psychological evaluation? Didn't they ask if you had any vision problems or hand-eye coordination issues?" Elena felt her cheeks burning, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact with the group. "My vision and coordination are fine, Ritchie. Sometimes it takes longer to master certain skills." "Master certain skills?" Mitchell's voice was incredulous now. "Salvador, you're not trying to master advanced tactical shooting. You're failing at basic marksmanship. We're talking about hitting a stationary target from 25 yards. My grandmother could do better with a slingshot." The crowd of onlookers was growing now, and Elena could see some of them pulling out their phones. The last thing she needed was video of this confrontation spreading through the academy, or, worse, ending up on social media where it could follow her for years. "Look," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I know I'm struggling with the shooting requirements. That's why I'm getting additional training. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses." "Different strengths and weaknesses," Pierce repeated mockingly. "What exactly are your strengths, Salvador? Besides wasting ammunition and making the rest of us look good by comparison?" Elena hesitated, knowing that anything she said about her academic background or previous experience would only provide more ammunition for their mockery. She'd learned early in the academy that being overqualified in some areas while struggling in others was seen as a character flaw rather than a natural variation in abilities. "I do well in the classroom portions," she said finally, immediately regretting how defensive she sounded. "The classroom portions," Mitchell said, his voice dripping with disdain. "That's great, Salvador. When you're in a dark alley with some drug dealer pointing a gun at you, you can bore him to death with your knowledge of constitutional law." The laughter was getting meaner now, and Elena could see that some of the other cadets were starting to look uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking, but none of them spoke up in her defense. "At least she'll be able to write a really accurate report about her own shooting," Walsh added, "assuming she survives long enough to write it." Elena felt something snap inside her chest, not anger exactly, but a cold, hard determination that surprised her with its intensity. She looked around at the circle of faces surrounding her, some laughing, some watching with obvious discomfort, all of them waiting to see how she would respond to this latest humiliation. "You know what?" Elena said, her voice quieter now but somehow carrying more weight than before. "You're right, I can't shoot. Right now today, I'm terrible at it, but I'm going to learn." Mitchell's expression shifted slightly, as if he'd expected her to break down or walk away, not to acknowledge her limitations so directly. "And when I do learn," Elena continued, "I'm going to be better than any of you can imagine. Not because I'm naturally gifted like Mitchell here, but because I understand what it means to work for something instead of having it come easy." The laughter had stopped now, and several cadets were looking distinctly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Big words from someone who can't hit the broad side of a barn," Pierce said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had carried earlier. "You want to make a bet on that?" Elena asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Mitchell's eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of bet?" Elena thought quickly, knowing that she was about to commit herself to something that could either vindicate her or destroy what little credibility she had left. 2 weeks from today, at the final qualification exam, if I don't achieve a passing score, I'll publicly apologize to this entire class for wasting everyone's time and resources. I'll admit that you were right about me not belonging here. And if you do pass?" Walsh asked, though her tone suggested she considered the possibility remote. "If I pass," Elena said, her voice growing stronger, "you all owe me the same public apology for the way you've treated me. And you stop calling me Spray and Pray Girl and start treating me like a fellow cadet who earned her place here." Mitchell grinned, clearly delighted by the opportunity to humiliate Elena even more thoroughly. "Deal, but let's make it interesting. You don't just have to pass, you have to score at least 80%. That's well above the minimum requirement." Elena felt her stomach lurch. An 80% score would require her to improve her accuracy by more than double in just 2 weeks. But the alternative, backing down now, would mean living with this treatment for the remainder of her time at the academy, assuming she wasn't dismissed entirely. "Deal," she said, extending her hand to Mitchell. He shook it with obvious satisfaction, clearly confident that he had just maneuvered Elena into an even more spectacular failure than anyone had anticipated. As the crowd began to disperse and cadets headed toward the main building for morning formation, Elena found herself standing alone, suddenly aware of the magnitude of what she had just committed herself to. She had 2 weeks to achieve something that had eluded her for 3 months, and she had just raised the stakes significantly. During morning formation, as the cadets stood in their regulation lines while Sergeant Harrison reviewed the day's training schedule, Elena caught several of her classmates glancing in her direction with expressions ranging from pity to anticipation. Word of the bet had already spread through the class, and she could feel the weight of their expectations, or rather, their certainty of her failure. "Today we'll be covering advanced emergency medical procedures," Harrison announced, followed by legal updates on search and seizure law, and finishing with defensive tactics training in the gymnasium. Elena noticed that firearms training wasn't on the schedule, which meant she wouldn't have to face the range again until tomorrow. That gave her one more day to contact Detective Chun and begin whatever remedial training might be available. During the medical procedures class, Elena found herself partnered with Maria Santos, one of the few cadets who had never participated in the mockery surrounding Elena's shooting problems. Santos was older than most of the other cadets, a former M2 who had decided to transition into law enforcement after 15 years in emergency medical services. "That was pretty bold this morning," Santos said quietly as they practiced trauma response techniques on training mannequins. Elena looked up from the chest compressions she was performing. "Probably pretty stupid too." "Maybe," Santos agreed. "But I respect the fact that you stood up for yourself. Most people would have just taken it and hoped it would eventually stop." "Will it stop?" Elena asked. "I mean, assuming I somehow managed to pass the qualification exam." Santos paused in her work, considering the question seriously. "Honestly, probably not completely. But bullies like Mitchell respect strength, even if they don't like it. If you can prove you belong here, they'll find other targets." Elena nodded, focusing on her training while trying not to think about the 2 weeks ahead. She had always been good at compartmentalizing. It was one of the skills that had made her successful in her previous career as a forensics consultant. But this felt different. This wasn't about analyzing evidence or calculating trajectories in a laboratory setting. This was about proving herself under pressure, in front of people who wanted to see her fail. During the lunch break, Elena finally worked up the courage to call Detective Chun. She found a quiet spot behind the academy's main building and dialed the number on the business card Harrison had given her. "Chun," came a crisp voice after 2 rings. "Detective Chun, this is Cadet Elena Salvador from the Police Academy. Sergeant Harrison said you might be able to help me with additional firearms training." There was a pause, and Elena heard papers rustling in the background. "Salvador," Chun said. "Harrison mentioned you. He said you're having some challenges with marksmanship, but that you're strong in other areas." "That single quotes a diplomatic way to put it," Elena admitted. "Detective, I'm going to be completely honest with you. My shooting scores are terrible. I have 2 weeks until the final qualification exam, and if I don't pass, I'll be dismissed from the academy." "What's your current average?" Chun asked. Elena took a deep breath. "About 35% accuracy." Another pause, longer this time. "That single quotes significant," Chun said finally. "Tell me, Salvador, what's your background before the academy?" Elena hesitated, unsure how much detail to provide. "I have a master's degree in physics from Stanford. I worked as a ballistics consultant for 4 years before deciding to pursue law enforcement." Now the pause was so long that Elena wondered if the call had been disconnected. "You have a master's degree in physics, and you worked as a ballistics consultant," Chun repeated slowly. "But you can't hit a target at 25 yards? "I know how it sounds," Elena said. "I understand the science perfectly. I can calculate everything about bullet trajectory, wind resistance, gravitational drop. But when I actually try to shoot, nothing works the way it should." "Interesting," Chun said, and Elena could hear genuine curiosity in her voice now. "Meet me at the department range tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Bring your academy gear and be prepared to work. And Salvador." "Yes, ma'am. Don't expect this to be easy. If we're going to turn this around in 2 weeks, you're going to have to be willing to completely rebuild everything you think you know about shooting." The call ended, leaving Elena staring at her phone and wondering what she had just gotten herself into. Tomorrow evening would mark the beginning of either her redemption or her final confirmation that she didn't belong in law enforcement. As she walked back toward the academy building for afternoon training, Elena could see Mitchell and his group watching her from across the parking lot. Mitchell raised his hand in a mock salute, his expression making it clear that he was already planning her public humiliation in 2 weeks. Elena straightened her shoulders and walked past them without acknowledgement. She had made her bet, and now she had to find a way to win it. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she drove toward the Riverside Police Department's main facility the following evening. The afternoon's training session had been particularly brutal, a live fire exercise where cadets had to engage multiple targets while moving through a tactical course. Elena had performed so poorly that Sergeant Harrison had stopped the exercise twice to publicly correct her technique, each interruption drawing snickers from Mitchell's group and sympathetic looks from the few cadets who still felt sorry for her. "Salvador, you're treating that weapon like it's going to bite you," Harrison had shouted after her third magazine change without a single confirmed hit. "Relax your death grip and remember smooth is fast, fast is smooth." But Elena couldn't relax. Every time she raised the weapon, she was acutely aware of 23 pairs of eyes watching her, waiting for her to fail again. The pressure had become a physical weight on her chest, making it difficult to breathe properly, let alone maintain the steady breathing pattern that marksmanship required. Now, as she pulled into the police department parking lot at 5:55 p.m., Elena felt that same crushing pressure intensifying. This wasn't just another training session. This was potentially her last chance to save her career before it even began. The department range was located in the basement of the main building, accessed through a security door that required a key card Elena didn't possess. She stood outside for several minutes, checking her watch and wondering if she should call Detective Chun's number again when the door opened from the inside. "Salvador?" The woman who emerged was not what Elena had expected. Detective Sarah Chun was petite, probably no more than 5'4", with an athletic build and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple polo shirt, but carried herself with the unmistakable confidence of someone completely comfortable with authority. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for meeting with me." Chun studied Elena for a moment with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything, her nervous posture, the academy gear bag slung over her shoulder, the barely concealed desperation in her expression. "Follow me," Chun said simply, turning back toward the door. The police department range was unlike the academy facility where Elena had been training. Instead of the open-air outdoor range with its concrete firing positions and paper targets fluttering in the wind, this was a sophisticated indoor facility with computerized target systems, advanced ventilation, and sound dampening that made conversation possible without shouting. "Drop your gear over there," Chun said, pointing to a bench along the wall. "Before we start shooting, I want to understand what's happening in your head when you're trying to engage a target." Elena set down her bag and removed her service weapon, checking to ensure it was unloaded before placing it on the bench. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Chun walked to a cabinet and retrieved her own pistol, a sleek, customized weapon that Elena recognized as a competition-grade firearm, far more advanced than the standard-issue academy guns. "Harrison told me you understand the science behind ballistics better than most instructors. Walk me through what should happen when you fire a shot." Elena felt more comfortable discussing theory than attempting practical application. The firing pin strikes the primer, igniting the powder charge. The expanding gases drive the bullet down the barrel, which imparts spin through the rifling grooves. The bullet exits at approximately 1,200 feet per second, depending on the load, and follows a parabolic trajectory influenced by gravity, air resistance, and any lateral wind forces. Chun nodded approvingly. "Textbook perfect. Now tell me what you're thinking about when you're actually holding the gun." Elena hesitated, realizing that this was where her confidence always crumbled. "I'm thinking about everything. Whether my stance is correct, whether my grip pressure is right, whether the sight alignment is perfect, whether my breathing is controlled, whether I'm squeezing the trigger straight back." Stop, Chun interrupted. Right there. That's your problem. Elena looked confused. Which part? All of it. You're thinking about everything instead of focusing on the one thing that matters. Chun raised her weapon in a smooth, practiced motion and fired a single shot downrange. Even without looking at the target, Elena could tell from Chun's body language that it had been a perfect hit. What were you thinking about just then? Elena asked. The front sight, Chun replied simply. Nothing else. Not my stance, not my grip, not my breathing. Just the front sight and where I wanted the bullet to go. Chun activated the electronic target system, bringing a fresh target forward to the 7-yard line. Everything else, stance, grip, breathing. Trigger control, those become muscle memory through repetition. But they can't work if your conscious mind is trying to micromanage every component simultaneously. Elena nodded, intellectually understanding the concept, but still feeling skeptical about its practical application. But if I'm not thinking about those things, how do I know I'm doing them correctly? That's what we're going to figure out. Chun said, load your weapon and take position at lane 3. Elena inserted a magazine into her service pistol and approached the firing line, immediately falling into the stance she had been taught at the academy, feet shoulder width apart. Dominant hand high on the grip, support hand wrapped around, leaning slightly forward to manage recoil. Stop, Chun said, before Elena could even raise the weapon. Start over, but this time I want you to close your eyes. Close my eyes? Trust me. Close your eyes and just hold the gun in a comfortable position. Don't think about proper technique. Just find a position that feels natural. Elena closed her eyes and raised the weapon, allowing her body to find its own balance point. To her surprise, the position felt different, more upright, less aggressive, with her grip adjusted slightly. Higher on the frame. Open your eyes but don't change anything, Chun instructed. How does that feel? Different, Elena admitted. Less forced. Good. Now, keeping that natural position, I want you to focus on only one thing, the front sight. Don't worry about perfect sight alignment. Don't worry about the target. Just look at the front sight and tell me what you see. Elena raised the weapon and found the front sight in her vision. It's a white dot, kind of blurry. Perfect. Now keeping your eyes on that front sight, press the trigger straight back until the gun fires. Elena concentrated on the front sight, trying to ignore every other stimulus around her. The sound of the ventilation system, the feeling of the grip in her hands, the awareness that Detective Chun was watching her every movement. She pressed the trigger slowly, feeling the resistance build until the weapon discharged with a sharp crack. Target coming back, Chun announced. Pressing a button on the control panel, Elena watched the target slide forward, expecting to see another complete miss. Instead, there was a hole in the lower left portion of the target, not a perfect shot, but an actual hit on the silhouette. I hit it, Elena said, her voice filled with disbelief. You did. And more importantly, you did it by thinking about only one thing instead of trying to control everything at once. Chun made a note on a small pad she carried. But we're just getting started. That was 7 yards. The academy qualification requires accuracy out to 25 yards. Over the next hour, Chun guided Elena through a systematic progression. 7 yards became 10, then 15, then 20. At each distance, Elena's accuracy declined, but she was consistently hitting the target, something she had rarely accomplished during academy training. The fundamentals are there, Chun observed as they finished the initial assessment. Your natural shooting position is actually quite good, and you have decent trigger control when you're not overthinking it. The problem is that you've been trying to force yourself into a shooting stance that doesn't fit your body mechanics. Elena was reloading magazines for another round of practice when Chun's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. All units, all units. We have an active shooter situation at Riverside Community College. Multiple casualties reported. SWAT team is en route. Chun immediately moved to secure her weapon and grab her gear bag. I have to go, she said to Elena. This is the kind of situation where every qualified officer responds. Elena watched as Chun prepared to leave, feeling a mixture of disappointment and understanding. Of course, a real emergency would take priority over remedial training for a struggling cadet. Detective, Elena called out as Chun headed toward the door. Will we be able to continue this tomorrow? Chun paused, her expression serious. Salvador, I want you to understand something. What's happening right now, officers responding to an active shooter situation. This is why accuracy matters. It's not about passing academy tests or proving yourself to your classmates. When someone is shooting at innocent people, police officers need to be able to stop the threat immediately and precisely. The weight of Chun's words settled over Elena as she realized she was hearing real-time radio traffic about officers rushing toward danger, knowing they might have to use their weapons to save lives. Every shot matters, Chun continued. Every miss could mean an innocent person dies while the threat continues. That's the standard you need to meet, not just 70% accuracy on a qualification exam, but the ability to place accurate shots when people's lives depend on it. Elena nodded, understanding for the first time that her shooting struggles weren't just a personal challenge or an academic requirement. They were a fundamental question about her ability to fulfill the most serious responsibility of law enforcement. Practice. What we worked on tonight, Chun said as she headed out the door. Natural stance, focus on the front sight, one shot at a time. And Salvador, start thinking about whether you're really ready for the responsibility that comes with carrying a badge and a gun. Elena remained at the range for another 30 minutes, practicing the techniques Chin had shown her. She found that her accuracy improved significantly when she stopped trying to force the correct academy stance and instead used the more natural position Chun had helped her discover. But as she drove home, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the radio traffic she had heard. Somewhere in the city, officers were potentially engaging in gunfights with a dangerous suspect. Their ability to protect innocent lives depended entirely on their marksmanship skills, the same skills Elena had been failing to master for months. The first time since beginning the academy, Elena began to question whether her struggles with shooting were just a training hurdle to overcome or a fundamental indicator that she wasn't suited for the realities of police work. The theoretical knowledge that had always been her strength seemed suddenly inadequate when measured against the life-and-death precision that real police work required. That night, Elena lay awake thinking about Detective Chun's words and the radio traffic about the active shooter. She realized that her bet with Mitchell and the academy qualification exam were no longer her primary concerns. The real question wasn't whether she could achieve an 80% score on a test. It was whether she could develop the shooting skills necessary to protect innocent people when their lives depended on her accuracy. The crisis wasn't just about her academic performance anymore. It was about whether Elena Salvador had what it took to carry the ultimate responsibility of a police officer. Responsibility to use deadly force accurately and decisively when no other options remained. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Elena made a decision that would define the rest of her training. She wasn't just going to work toward passing the qualification exam. She was going to push herself to achieve the kind of precision that could save lives, even if it meant acknowledging that she might not be capable of reaching that standard. Stakes had become much higher than a bet with her classmates. They had become a matter of life and death. The news about the community college shooting dominated the academy's morning briefing. Sergeant Harrison stood before the assembled cadets with uncharacteristic solemnity as he delivered details that made everyone understand the reality of what they were training for. 3 civilians wounded, suspect neutralized by responding officers. Harrison reported, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had been through similar situations. Detective Chun from our tactical unit was among the first responders. Her precise shooting ended the threat before additional casualties occurred. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The woman who had been patiently working with her just hours earlier had been engaged in actual combat, using the same skills Elena was desperately trying to master. This incident serves as a reminder, Harrison continued, that the marksmanship training you receive here isn't academic. When you graduate from this academy and take your oath, you may be called upon to use these skills to protect innocent lives. There's no room for spray and pray tactics when civilians are in danger. The phrase hit Elena like a physical blow. She could feel eyes turning toward her as Harrison spoke, and she caught Brad Mitchell's smirk from across the formation. The nickname that had started as casual mockery had taken on a much darker significance in light of real-world events. Today's training will include a tactical scenario exercise, Harrison announced. You'll be working in teams to respond to simulated, high-stress situations that require precise decision-making and accurate shooting under pressure. Elena's stomach dropped. Tactical scenarios were always her worst nightmare, combining the shooting skills she lacked with the added pressure of time constraints, moving targets, and multiple decision points. The thought of failing publicly in front of her entire class, just days after making her bet with Mitchell, filled her with dread. As the cadets broke formation and headed toward their first class of the day, Maria Santos fell into step beside Elena. Rough timing for a tactical exercise, Santos observed quietly. Tell me about it, Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I can barely hit a stationary target at 25 yards. Now they want me to engage moving targets while making split-second decisions. Santos glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Look, Elena, I know everyone's been giving you a hard time about the shooting, but you're one of the smartest people in this class. Your tactical thinking in the classroom scenarios is always spot on. Maybe if you focus on that part and don't overthink the shooting. Elena appreciated Santos's attempt at encouragement, but she knew the reality of her situation. Intelligence and tactical knowledge meant nothing if she couldn't execute when it mattered. The morning passed with classes on constitutional law and emergency medical procedure subjects where Elena excelled and could temporarily forget about her marksmanship problems. But as lunchtime approached and the afternoon tactical exercise loomed, her anxiety began building again. During lunch, Elena found herself sitting alone while most of her classmates gathered in their usual social groups. She picked at her sandwich while reviewing her notes from the previous evening session with Detective Chun, trying to reinforce the mental techniques they had practiced. Mind if I join you? Elena looked up to see Detective Chun standing beside her table, carrying a cafeteria tray and wearing the same civilian clothes she had worn to the range the night before. Detective Chun, of course, please sit down. Elena was surprised to see her at the academy. I heard about what happened last night. Are you okay? Chun sat down and unwrapped her sandwich with practiced efficiency. I'm fine. 3-shot group, center mass, threat neutralized. The wounded civilians are all expected to recover fully. The casual way Chun described what must have been an intense, life-threatening situation struck Elena as both admirable and intimidating. I wanted to follow up on our training session, Chun continued. How did you feel about the techniques we worked on? Elena hesitated, unsure how much detail to share. Better than usual, actually. I mean, I was hitting the target consistently at close range, which is more than I'd been able to do in regular training. But? Chun prompted, clearly sensing Elena's underlying uncertainty. But it was a controlled environment. No time pressure, no one watching, no stress beyond my own anxiety. This afternoon we have tactical scenarios with the whole class watching, and I'm worried that all the progress from last night will disappear. Chun took a bite of her sandwich and studied Elena thoughtfully. Let me ask you something, Salvador. What do you think was the most important factor in stopping that shooter last night? Elena considered the question. Your marksmanship skills? Your ability to place accurate shots under pressure? Wrong, Chun said firmly. The most important factor was my ability to process the tactical situation quickly and make the right decision about when and how to engage. The shooting was just the final execution of that decision. Alina looked confused. I don't understand. You've been so focused on your shooting struggles that you've lost sight of your strengths. Harrison tells me you have the highest scores in the class on tactical decision-making exercises. Your written work on use-of-force scenarios is textbook perfect. You understand the legal and ethical framework better than cadets who've been through the academy before. Chun leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. Salvador, shooting is a mechanical skill. It can be learned through repetition and practice. But tactical thinking, the ability to assess a situation, identify threats, and make split-second decisions that protect innocent lives, that's much harder to teach. And you already have it. Elena felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overwhelmed by practical concerns. That's nice to hear, Detective, but if I can't hit what I'm aiming at, all the tactical thinking in the world won't matter. True. Chun acknowledged. But here's what I learned about you last night. When you stop trying to be perfect and start focusing on the fundamentals, you can shoot. Maybe not competition level yet, but well enough to be effective. Chun glanced at her. Watch and stood up. I've arranged to observe this afternoon's tactical exercise. I want to see how you perform when you combine your natural tactical abilities with the shooting techniques we practiced. Elena felt her anxiety spike. You're going to be watching? I'm going to be evaluating, Chun corrected. There's a difference. If you perform well this afternoon, I'm going to recommend that you be transferred to advanced tactical training for your final week before qualification. If you struggle, we'll know we need to focus purely on basic marksmanship. As Chun walked away, Elena realized that the stakes of the afternoon exercise had just escalated dramatically. It wasn't just about avoiding humiliation in front of her classmates. Anymore, it was about proving that she had the potential for advanced training that could make the difference between passing and failing her final qualification. The tactical exercise took place in a specially designed training facility that simulated various real-world environments. Elena found herself assigned to a team with 3 other cadets, including Tommy Ritchie, who had made it clear that he considered her a liability. Great, Ritchie muttered as their team reviewed their assigned scenario. We get stuck with spray and pray. This is going to be a disaster. The scenario involved responding to a domestic violence call where the suspect had barricaded himself in a house with a hostage. The team would have to clear the structure room by room, make tactical decisions about when to use force, and potentially engage targets while avoiding harm to the simulated hostage. Listen up, Elena said as they prepared to enter the facility, drawing surprised looks from her teammates. I know you think I'm going to mess this up, but I've studied the floor plans and I have some thoughts about our approach. Ritchie started to object, but Elena continued with a confidence that surprised even herself. The suspect will most likely position himself in the back bedroom. It's the most defensible position with only one entry point. But there's a window that faces the alley, which means he'll be watching for flanking movements. If we approach from the front and make noise, we can draw his attention while one team member moves to cover that window. Her teammates exchanged glances. Elena rarely spoke up during group exercises, and her tactical analysis was more detailed than anything they had heard from her before. Additionally, Elena continued, the domestic violence context suggests this is an emotional situation, not a planned tactical engagement. The suspect is likely to make impulsive moves rather than calculated ones. We need to be ready for sudden escalation, but also prepared for the possibility of negotiation. When they entered the training facility, Elena found herself naturally taking point position, directing her team's movement through the structure with confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Her voice was steady as she called out tactical commands, and her decision-making was rapid and precise. The first 2 rooms were clear. In the 3rd room, they encountered their first challenge, a simulated civilian who could be either an innocent bystander or an armed accomplice. Elena made the call to detain and secure the person without using force, a decision that proved correct when the exercise concluded. But it was in the final room that everything came together. The suspect was positioned exactly where Elena had predicted, holding a dummy hostage and pointing a weapon toward the entry point. Elena's team was perfectly positioned to cover both the primary entry and the window escape route. "Police, drop your weapon," Elena commanded, her voice carrying authority that surprised everyone, including herself. When the simulated suspect swung his weapon toward her position, Elena's response was instinctive. She raised her training weapon, found the front sight, exactly as Detective Chen had taught her, and fired 2 controlled shots en masse. Both rounds hit the target precisely, and the exercise was over. The silence that followed was profound. Elena's teammates stared at her with expressions of shock and newfound respect. From the observation area, she could see Detective Chen nodding approvingly, but it was Sergeant Harrison's reaction that really mattered. He approached Elena's team with an expression she had never seen before, surprise, mixed with genuine approval. "Salvador," he said, his voice carrying across the training facility, "that was textbook tactical response. Excellent situational assessment. Proper team coordination, and precise shooting under pressure." Elena felt a surge of vindication that was almost overwhelming. For months, she had been dismissed as incompetent, mocked for her struggles, and written off as someone who didn't belong in law enforcement. But in this moment, using the techniques Detective Chen had taught her and drawing on tactical knowledge she had always possessed, she had performed exactly as a police officer should. Mitchell's group was scheduled for the next exercise, and Elena could see them watching her with expressions that ranged from confusion to hostility. The confident smirk that Mitchell usually wore when observing Elena's failures had been replaced by something that looked almost like concern. As Elena's team debriefed their exercise, Detective Chen approached with a small notebook in her hand. "Salvador," she said quietly, "I'm recommending you for advanced tactical training starting tomorrow. What I just saw suggests you have the potential to be more than just a competent officer. You could be an exceptional one." Elena felt tears threatening to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Detective. I won't let you down." "You already haven't," Chen replied. "The question now is whether you can maintain this level of performance when the pressure really intensifies. Because Salvador, what you just demonstrated is exactly the kind of precise, controlled response that saved lives last night at the Pives Community College." As Elena left the training facility that afternoon, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. The crisis wasn't just escalating, it was transforming. She was no longer the helpless cadet who couldn't hit a target. She was becoming someone who could combine tactical intelligence with accurate shooting under pressure. But she also knew that the real test was still ahead. Advanced tactical training would push her further than she had ever been pushed before. And her bet with Mitchell was still looming just days away. The crisis was reaching its peak. And Elena Salvador was finally ready to meet it head-on. Elena arrived at the police department's advanced training facility at 5:30 a.m., 30 minutes before her scheduled session with Detective Chen. The building was still dark except for emergency lighting, and the parking lot was nearly empty. She sat in her car for a few minutes, reviewing the notes she had compiled from their previous sessions and trying to calm the nervous energy that had kept her awake most of the night. The advanced tactical training facility was unlike anything at the academy. Where the academy range was designed for basic qualification shooting, this facility featured moving targets, low light conditions, multiple level platforms, and computerized scenarios that could simulate virtually any real-world situation an officer might encounter. Chun arrived precisely at 6 a.m., carrying 2 large equipment bags and a thermos of coffee that suggested she had been up early preparing for the session. Ready for the real work? Chun asked as she unlocked the facility's main door. Elena followed her inside, immediately noting the sophisticated equipment that lined the wall's electronic targeting systems, ballistic computers, and simulation. Gear that looked more like military special operations equipment than standard police training tools. "Detective, can I ask you something?" Elena said as Chun began setting up the morning's exercise. "Go ahead." "Yesterday, when you recommended me for advanced training, what exactly did you see that made you think I was ready for this level of instruction?" Chun paused in her equipment setup and turned to face Elena directly. "What I saw was someone who stopped trying to be perfect and started focusing on being effective. In that tactical exercise, you didn't overthink your shooting, you just did what needed to be done." She activated a computerized targeting system that Elena had never seen before. "But more importantly, I saw someone who understood that shooting is just one component of police work. Your tactical decision-making, your team leadership, your ability to read a situation, those are skills that can't be taught to just anyone." Elena nodded, but Chun wasn't finished. "However," Chun continued, her tone becoming more serious, "what we're going to do here today and tomorrow is going to push you beyond anything you've experienced so far. Advanced tactical training isn't about qualification scores or academy requirements. It's about preparing you for the kind of situations where officers get killed because they weren't prepared." The weight of Chun's words settled over Elena as she realized that this training was going to be fundamentally different from anything she had done before. "The scenario we're starting with today is based on the community college shooting from 2 nights ago," Chun explained. "Multiple targets, civilian hostages, low light conditions, and time pressure. You'll have to make split-second decisions about when to shoot, when to hold fire, and how to prioritize threats." Elena felt her heart rate spike. "Are you sure I'm ready for something that advanced?" "No," Chun replied bluntly. "I'm not sure. That's what we're here to find out." The first scenario began with Elena entering a darkened room where computerized targets would appear at random intervals. Some targets represented armed threats that required immediate engagement. Others represented innocent civilians who would result in automatic failure if shot. The exercise required not just accurate shooting, but instant threat assessment under extreme pressure. Target discrimination is what separates professional law enforcement from amateurs. Chun explained as she activated the system. Anyone can hit a paper target at the range. Officers need to be able to hit the right target at the right time while avoiding harm to innocents. Elena entered the scenario room with her weapon drawn, immediately feeling the disorientation that came with the low-light environment. Her academy training had included some night shooting, but nothing with this level of complexity. The first target appeared to her left, an armed figure holding what appeared to be a rifle. Elena engaged immediately, placing 2 shots center mass before the target disappeared. A green light indicated successful threat neutralization. Seconds later, another figure appeared directly in front of her, but this one was holding what looked like a cell phone rather than a weapon. Elena held fire, and the target disappeared. Without penalty, the scenario continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Elena found herself moving through multiple rooms, each presenting different tactical challenges. In one room, she had to engage a threat while avoiding harm to a hostage positioned directly behind the target. In another, she faced multiple simultaneous threats that required rapid target prioritization. When the exercise finally ended, Elena was breathing hard and covered in perspiration. But more importantly, she had successfully completed the scenario without any civilian casualties and with a 90% accuracy rate on legitimate targets. "How do you feel?" Chun asked as Alina secured her weapon. Exhausted, Alina admitted. But also focused. I wasn't thinking about my grip or my stance or my breathing. I was just reacting to the threats as they appeared. Exactly, Chun said with satisfaction. That's what advanced training is designed to achieve, moving past conscious technique to instinctive response. But Chun's expression grew more serious as she consulted her training notes. Elena, I need to tell you something. What you just accomplished in that scenario is better than most officers achieve after months of advanced training. Your accuracy rate and decision-making speed were exceptional. Elena felt a surge of pride, but Chun held up a hand to continue. However, there's something you need to understand about your situation at the academy. Your improvement has been noticed, and not everyone is happy about it. Elena felt a chill of apprehension. What do you mean? Chun pulled out her phone and showed Elena a text message she had received earlier that morning. It was from Sergeant Harrison. Chun, need to talk about Salvador's situation. Political pressure building. Call me ASAP. Political pressure? Elena asked, confused. Think about it, Chun explained. You've been labeled as the Academy's failure case for months. Suddenly, you're performing at an advanced level just days before your qualification exam. Some people are going to see that as suspicious. Elena felt her stomach drop. They think I'm cheating somehow? Not cheating exactly. But there are people who have invested in the narrative that you don't belong in law enforcement. Your sudden improvement threatens that narrative, and that makes them uncomfortable. Chun's phone rang, and she answered immediately. Chun here. Yes, sir, I'm with her now. I understand your concerns, but you need to see her performance data. No, sir, there's nothing irregular about her improvement. Yes, sir, I'll be there in an hour. Elena watched Chun's expression grow increasingly tense during the conversation. What's happening? Elena asked when Sheen ended the call. There's going to be a meeting this afternoon. You, me, Harrison, and apparently some academy administrators I don't recognize. Someone has raised questions about your training and whether it constitutes unfair advantage over other cadets. Elena felt the world spinning around her. Unfair advantage? I'm still trying to catch up to where everyone else started. I know that, and Harrison knows that. But politics in police departments can be complicated. Chun began packing up her equipment with sharp, angry movements. There are people who were comfortable with you failing because it confirmed their assumptions. Your success is forcing them to reconsider those assumptions, and they don't like it. Elena sat down heavily on a bench, feeling the crushing weight of a situation that seemed to be spiraling beyond her control. So what happens now? Now we find out whether the department is more interested in supporting officers who overcome challenges or protecting people who want to maintain the status quo. Chun shouldered her equipment bags and turned to face Elena directly. But Elena, I want you to understand something. Regardless of what happens in that meeting, what you've accomplished in the past few days is real. You've proven that you have the skills and the mindset to be an exceptional police officer. But if they decide my training is somehow unfair or irregular, then we'll deal with that when it happens, Chun interrupted. But right now, I want you to focus on one thing. You are not the same person who walked into my range 3 days ago. You've discovered abilities you didn't know you had, and you've overcome obstacles that would have stopped most people. Elena nodded, trying to draw strength from Chun's confidence. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to fall apart just when she had finally found her footing. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the Academy's main conference room. Elena spent the intervening hours trying to focus on her regular classes, but word of the irregularities investigation had somehow leaked to her fellow cadets. I heard they're investigating you for cheating on the shooting quals, Brad Mitchell said loudly enough for half the class to hear during their lunch break. Guess someone finally figured out that your sudden improvement was too good to be true. I haven't even taken the qualification exam yet, Alina replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Right, Mitchell said with a knowing smirk. But somehow, you went from worst in the class to tactical training in 3 days. That doesn't happen naturally. Alina realized that Mitchell and his supporters had likely been instrumental in raising the questions about her training. They had been comfortable with her as the class failure, but her improvement threatened the social dynamics they had established. You know what I think? Mitchell continued, his voice carrying that particular tone of false reasonableness that Alina had learned to dread. I think someone felt sorry for you and decided to give you special treatment that the rest of us didn't get. That's not fair to cadets who earned their scores honestly. Alina felt something snap inside her, not anger, exactly, but a cold, hard determination that reminded her of the moment she had decided to pursue law enforcement after her brother's death. You want to know what's not fair, Mitchell? Alina said, standing up and facing him directly. What's not fair is spending 3 months being mocked and dismissed while I tried to learn the same skills you take for granted. What's not fair is being called spray and pray girl by people who never bothered to help or encourage anyone who was struggling. The cafeteria had gone quiet, with other cadets turning to watch the confrontation. But you know what? Alina continued, her voice growing stronger. I'm done apologizing for getting better. I'm done accepting that I have to fail to make other people comfortable. And I'm definitely done letting people like you define what I'm capable of. Mitchell's confident expression had shifted to something that looked almost like uncertainty. In 3 days, I'm going to take that qualification exam, Alina said. And when I pass it, when I achieve the 80% score I promised, it won't be because of special treatment or unfair advantages. It'll be because I refused to quit when everyone expected me to fail. Alina gathered her things and walked toward the door, but she turned back for one final comment. Oh, and Mitchell, when I do pass that exam, I expect you to keep your end of our bet. A public apology to the entire class for the way you've treated me. As Alina left the cafeteria, she could hear the buzz of conversation that followed her. Exit. She had just committed herself publicly to achieving the 80% score that had seemed impossible just days earlier. But more importantly, she had finally stood up for herself in a way that made it clear she was no longer the helpless victim of other people's assumptions. The meeting that would determine her future was just hours away, but Alina Salvador was no longer the same person who had been dismissed as support staff or mocked as spray and pray girl. She had found her voice, and she was ready to use it. The academy conference room felt smaller than usual, with 6 people crowded around the oval table. Alina sat at one end, flanked by Detective Chun, while Sergeant Harrison occupied his usual position at the head. Across from them sat 3 administrators Alina had never seen before. Deputy Chief Margaret Foster, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair and calculating eyes. Captain James Rodriguez from Internal Affairs, whose presence immediately suggested this was more serious than Alina had anticipated. And Dr. Patricia Williams, the Academy's Psychological Evaluation Coordinator. Let's begin, Deputy Chief Foster said, opening a thick file folder. We're here to discuss concerns that have been raised about Cadet Salvador's recent performance improvements and the training methods being employed outside standard academy protocols. Alina felt her mouth go dry. This wasn't just about her training with Detective Chun. This was a formal investigation. Deputy Chief, Chun interjected, I'd like to understand the specific nature of these concerns. Cadet Salvador has been receiving additional instruction on her own time, using standard departmental facilities and approved training methodologies. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression skeptical. Detective Chun, in your report, you indicate that Cadet Salvador improved from 35% accuracy to 90% accuracy in a matter of days. That level of improvement is statistically improbable. Without some form of assistance, Alina felt her temper flare. What kind of assistance are you suggesting, Captain? Elena, Dr. Williams said in the patronizing tone that Elena had learned to hate. We're not making accusations. We're simply trying to understand how such dramatic improvement is possible in such a short time frame. Detective Chun pulled out her tablet and began displaying training data. If you'll look at the actual performance metrics, the improvement is entirely consistent with what happens when a student receives proper individual instruction, tailored to their specific challenges. She projected a graph showing Elena's shooting scores over time. Cadet Salvador's problems were never about physical capability or basic competence. They were about applying textbook techniques that didn't match her natural body mechanics and fighting performance anxiety caused by months of negative reinforcement. Sergeant Harrison, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I've reviewed Detective Chun's training notes and observed Cadet Salvador's recent performance myself. The improvement is dramatic, but it's also legitimate. Deputy Chief Foster wasn't satisfied. Sergeant Harrison, I've received reports that Cadet Salvador has been given access to advanced training facilities and specialized instruction not available to other cadets. How do you justify that? Elena realized that this entire investigation was based on complaints from her fellow cadets, almost certainly initiated by Mitchell and his supporters who couldn't accept that she was succeeding. Deputy Chief, Elena said, surprising everyone by speaking without being directly addressed. Can I ask who filed these complaints? Foster's expression hardened. That information is confidential, Cadet Salvador. But I think I can guess, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. It's interesting that these concerns about unfair advantages only emerged after I started succeeding. When I was failing for 3 months, nobody questioned whether I was receiving adequate training or support. Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat. Cadet Salvador, your attitude isn't helping your case here. My case? Elena stood up, feeling the anger and frustration of months of dismissal finally reaching a breaking point. Captain, what exactly is my case? That I worked with a qualified instructor to overcome performance problems? That I spent my own time practicing skills that other cadets learned naturally? That I refused to quit when everyone expected me to fail? Dr. Williams attempted to intervene. Elena, please sit down. We're trying to help you understand. No, Elena interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. You're trying to find a reason to discredit my improvement because it doesn't fit the narrative that some people have invested in. She turned to face Deputy Chief Foster directly. Ma'am, I want to make something very clear. I didn't ask for special treatment. I asked for help. Detective Chun provided that help using standard training methods in departmental facilities during off-duty hours. Everything we did was documented and by the book. Elena pulled out her own folder notes and performance data she had compiled over the past few days. Here are my training logs, my practice schedules, and my performance metrics from every session. If you want to investigate something, investigate the fact that a cadet with my academic qualifications and previous experience was allowed to struggle for months without anyone offering constructive assistance. The room fell silent. Elena could see that her direct challenge had caught the administrators off guard. Detective Chen seized the opportunity. Deputy Chief, I'd like to add something to Cadet Salvador's statement. In 15 years of tactical training, I've rarely seen a student with her combination of intellectual ability and tactical instincts. Her improvement isn't suspicious. It's what happens when someone with natural talent finally receives proper instruction. Chun activated her tablet again, displaying footage from Elena's advanced tactical scenarios. This is video from yesterday's training session. Watch her decision-making process, her target discrimination, her tactical movement. This isn't the result of shortcuts or special treatment. This is someone discovering abilities they always possessed. As the video played, Elena watched herself moving through the complex scenario with confidence and precision. Even she was surprised by how competent and professional she appeared on screen. Sergeant Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know what I'm seeing here? I'm seeing a cadet who was written off by a system that didn't take the time to understand her specific needs. Detective Chun identified those needs and addressed them. That's not unfair advantage, that's good training." Captain Rodriguez wasn't convinced. "Even if we accept that the training methods were legitimate, the timing is suspicious. Why didn't this improvement happen earlier in the academy program?" Elena felt a surge of clarity, as if months of confusion and self-doubt were suddenly crystallizing into perfect understanding. "Because nobody believed I could improve," she said simply. "Captain, for 3 months I was treated like a hopeless case. I was mocked, dismissed, and told repeatedly that I didn't belong here. When you're constantly told you're incompetent, it becomes incredibly difficult to perform competently." She looked around the room at the faces watching her, some skeptical, some curious, some beginning to show understanding. "Detective Chun did something nobody else had done. She approached my training as a problem, to be solved rather than evidence of my inadequacy. She identified specific technical issues and addressed them systematically. She treated me like someone who could succeed rather than someone who was destined to fail." Dr. Williams made a note in her file. "That's an interesting perspective." "Elena, but Dr. Williams," Elena interrupted, with respect, "I don't think my perspective is what's being questioned here. I think what's being questioned is whether the department is comfortable with someone like me succeeding when it's easier to maintain assumptions about who belongs in law enforcement." The silence that followed was profound. Elena had just called out the underlying bias that everyone in the room knew existed, but nobody wanted to acknowledge directly. Deputy Chief Foster finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "Cadet Salvador, those are serious accusations about departmental culture. They're not accusations, ma'am. They're observations based on 3 months of experience." Elena's voice was steady now, no longer defensive, but not aggressive either, simply honest. "I came to this academy with a master's degree in physics and 4 years of ballistics consulting experience. I scored higher than anyone else in the class on written exams and tactical theory. But because I struggled with one practical skill, I was labeled as incompetent and treated accordingly." Elena turned to face each person in the room as she continued. "Detective Chun proved that my struggling wasn't about lack of ability, it was about lack of appropriate instruction. In less than a week, she helped me achieve performance levels that my regular instructors said were impossible for me." She sat back down, her voice becoming quieter but more intense. "So the question isn't whether my improvement is legitimate. The question is why it took a formal complaint to get me the kind of instruction that should have been available from the beginning." Detective Chun added her support. "Deputy Chief, I've trained hundreds of officers over my career. Elena's improvement pattern is exactly what I've seen with other students who had natural ability that was being suppressed by inappropriate training methods or negative learning environments." Sergeant Harrison nodded slowly. "I have to admit, Detective Chun is right. Looking back at Salvador's academy performance, we focused so much on her shooting problems that we overlooked her strengths in other areas. Maybe if we'd addressed her training needs earlier." Captain Rodriguez closed his file with obvious reluctance. "Even if we accept that the training was legitimate, there's still the matter of other cadets feeling that Salvador received advantages. They didn't." Elena felt her patience finally exhausted. "Captain, the other cadets who are complaining are the same ones who spent months mocking me and telling me I didn't belong here. They were perfectly comfortable with me failing. It's only my success that they find objectionable." She stood up again, but this time her movement was calm and controlled rather than angry. "I'll make this simple for everyone. Tomorrow is the final qualification examination. I'll take the same test as every other cadet. under the same conditions, with the same standards. If I achieve the 80% score I promised, then my training was effective and legitimate. If I don't, then you can dismiss my improvement as a fluke and move on. Elena looked directly at Deputy Chief Foster. But ma'am, I want to be clear about something. I'm not going to apologize for getting better. I'm not going to downplay my improvement to make other people comfortable. And I'm not going to accept that struggling cadets should be written off instead of helped. Deputy Chief Foster studied Elena for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Very well, Cadet Salvador. You'll take the qualification examination tomorrow as scheduled. Your performance will speak for itself. She closed her file and stood up. However, I want to make something clear as well. This department values both individual achievement and program integrity. We'll be monitoring your examination very carefully. As the administrators filed out of the room, Detective Chun turned to Elena with a mixture of admiration and concern. That was either very brave or very stupid, Chun said quietly. Elena smiled for the first time in hours. Probably both. But Detective, I'm tired of letting other people define what I'm capable of. Tomorrow I'm going to show them exactly who Elena Salvador really is. As they left the conference room, Elena realized that the investigation had accomplished something unexpected. Instead of undermining her confidence, it had forced her to articulate her own story and claim ownership of her improvement. Tomorrow's qualification exam wasn't just about marksmanship anymore. It was about proving that determination and proper training could overcome any obstacle, even the obstacle of other people's limited expectations. Elena Salvador was ready to take that test. The morning of the final qualification exam dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect visibility that left no room for excuses about weather conditions affecting performance. Elena arrived at the academy an hour early, not because she needed extra preparation time, but because she wanted to experience the calm before what would undoubtedly be the most scrutinized shooting test in Academy history. Word of yesterday's investigation had spread through the academy like wildfire. Elena could feel the weight of attention as she walked across the parking lot, some curious, some supportive, but most anticipating what they expected to be her spectacular public failure. Detective Chun was already at the range, setting up equipment. Alongside Sergeant Harrison and two additional instructors Elena didn't recognize. The presence of extra personnel confirmed that this examination would be monitored and documented beyond normal protocols. How are you feeling? Chun asked as Elena approached the equipment table. Surprisingly calm, Elena replied, and meant it. The anger and frustration that had been building for months had crystallized into a cold, focused determination that felt almost surreal in its clarity. Good. Remember what we practiced: natural stance, front sight focus, one shot at a time. Don't think about scores or percentages or people watching. Just execute the fundamentals. Elena nodded, but her attention was drawn to the group of cadets gathering in the observation area. All 23 of her classmates were present, despite the exam being individual assessments where attendance wasn't required. Brad Mitchell stood at the center of his usual group, but his typical confident demeanor seemed forced this morning. At precisely 8 a.m., Sergeant Harrison called the class to attention. Today's final qualification examination will follow standard department protocols, he announced, his voice carrying across the range. Each cadet will fire 50 rounds from multiple distances and positions. Minimum passing score is 70%. Scores will be posted immediately upon completion. Elena noticed that Harrison didn't mention the 80% target she had committed to achieving, the score that would settle her bet with Mitchell and prove that her improvement was genuine. Due to recent attention on this examination, Harrison continued, we'll have additional oversight and documentation. Deputy Chief Foster and Captain Rodriguez will observe, and all scores will be independently verified. Elena felt a slight tightness in her stomach as she saw the two administrators taking positions in the observation area, but it was quickly replaced by determination. She had demanded the opportunity to prove herself under scrutiny. Now she would have to deliver. "Salvador, you're first up," Harrison called out. The choice to have her shoot first was either coincidence or deliberate psychological pressure. Elena preferred to believe it was the latter. It meant they expected her to fail publicly and wanted to get it over with quickly. As Elena approached the firing line, she became aware of how completely silent the range had become. Even the usual background noise of equipment and casual conversation had stopped. Everyone was watching. She took her position at the 7-yard line for the first phase of the qualification course, loaded her weapon, and waited for Harrison's command to begin. "Shooter ready?" Harrison called out. "Ready," Elena replied, her voice steady and clear. "Begin." Elena raised her weapon and immediately found her natural stance, the position Detective Chun had helped her discover rather than the rigid academy posture she had struggled with for months. Her first shot broke cleanly, and she could see the impact in the center ring of the target before the sound had fully faded. Shot after shot, Elena worked through the 7-yard phase with methodical precision. Each trigger press was deliberate and controlled, each sight picture clear and focused. She was dimly aware of the absolute silence from the observation area, but her concentration was entirely on the front sight and the target. "Cease fire, make safe, step back," Harrison commanded after the final shot of the first phase. Elena secured her weapon and stepped back from the line as Harrison activated the electronic target system to score her performance. The target slid forward on its cable system, and even from 20 yards away, Elena could see a tight cluster of holes in the center scoring area. 7-yard phase, 25 rounds, 25 hits, center mass, Harrison announced. 100%. Murmur rippled through the observation area. Perfect scores on individual phases weren't unheard of, but Elena had just achieved perfect accuracy at a distance where she had previously struggled to hit the target at all. 15-yard phase, Harrison called out. "Load and make ready." The 15-yard distance had been Elena's biggest challenge during academy training, far enough to require precise sight alignment, but close enough that she had always overthought her technique. As she took position, Elena consciously pushed away thoughts of her previous failures at this distance and focused solely on Detective Chun's training. The second phase required 20 rounds in a timed sequence that tested both accuracy and speed. Elena had practiced this exact drill dozens of times over the past week, and her muscle memory took over as soon as Harrison gave the command to begin. Her shooting rhythm was smooth and consistent sight picture, trigger press, follow through, reset. She was no longer thinking about individual shots, but letting her training guide her movements. The target seemed larger and clearer than they ever had during practice sessions. "Cease fire, make safe, step back." Elena complied, feeling the same calm confidence she had experienced during her advanced tactical training. Whatever happened with the scoring, she knew she had executed exactly as she had been trained. 15-yard phase, 20 rounds, 19 hits, center mass, 1 hit scoring ring, Harrison announced. 95%. This time the murmur from the observation area was louder and more sustained. Elena could see Deputy Chief Foster making notes on a clipboard, while several of her fellow cadets were looking at each other with obvious confusion. But it was the final phase, 25 yards, that would determine everything. This was the distance where Elena had experienced her most humiliating failures, where she had earned the nickname Spray and Pray Girl, and where she would either vindicate months of struggle or confirm that her improvement was somehow artificial. 25-yard phase, Harrison announced. 5 rounds slow fire precision, standing unsupported. Elena approached the firing line for the final time, acutely aware that her performance in the next few minutes would define not just her career, but her entire sense of self-worth. The 25-yard targets looked impossibly small compared to the shorter distances, but Elena reminded herself that the fundamentals remained the same regardless of distance. She took her natural shooting stance, raised her weapon, and found her sight picture. The front sight was crisp and clear against the target, and Elena felt the same focused calm that had carried her through Detective Chun's advanced training scenarios. Her first shot broke smoothly, and Elena could see the impact in the center ring before lowering her weapon to assess. Perfect hit. The second shot felt identical to the first, smooth trigger press, clear sight picture, controlled follow-through. Another center hit by the fourth shot. Elena realized that she was no longer just shooting while she was shooting, at a level that exceeded anything she had achieved even during her best practice sessions with Detective Chun. Her concentration was absolute, her technique flawless, and her confidence unshakable. The fifth and final shot of the qualification course felt almost anticlimactic. Elena knew before the bullet left the barrel that it would find its mark exactly where she had aimed. Cease fire, make safe, step back. Elena secured her weapon and stepped away from the firing line, suddenly aware that the silence from the observation area had become almost oppressive. She turned to look at the faces watching her and saw expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to admiration. Harrison activated the target system to retrieve Elena's final target, and the mechanical whirring of the cable system was the only sound on the entire range. When the target reached the firing line, Harrison examined it for several long seconds before looking up at Elena with an expression she had never seen from him before, genuine respect mixed with amazement. 25-yard phase, Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the silent range. 5 rounds fired, 5 hits center mass, 100%. Elena felt her knees go weak as the implications hit her. She had not only passed the qualification examination, she had achieved perfect scores on 2 of the 3 phases and missed perfect overall by a single shot. Final score, Harrison continued, consulting his scoring sheet. 50 rounds fired, 49 hits center mass, 1 hit scoring ring. Overall accuracy, 98%. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. 98%. She had not only achieved the 80% score required, but with Mitchell she had exceeded it by 18 percentage points and delivered one of the highest qualification scores in Academy history. Deputy Chief Foster approached the firing line, her expression unreadable as she examined Elena's targets and Harrison's scoring documentation. Sergeant Harrison, Foster said finally, her voice carrying across the range, please confirm this scoring for the record. Confirmed, ma'am. Cadet Salvador achieved 98% accuracy on the final qualification examination using STANDARD equipment under standard conditions with independent observation. Foster turned to face Elena directly. Cadet Salvador, this performance represents one of the highest qualification scores we've recorded in over a decade. Elena felt a surge of vindication so powerful it was almost overwhelming. Months of humiliation, mockery, and self-doubt had been erased in 50 carefully placed shots. But it was Brad Mitchell's reaction that truly marked Elena's transformation. The cadet who had led the campaign to dismiss and marginalize her was now staring at the scoring board with an expression of complete defeat. The narrative he had constructed about Elena's incompetence had been shattered so thoroughly that he seemed unable to process what had happened. "Mitchell," Elena called out, her voice carrying the quiet authority she had discovered during her confrontation with the administrators. "I believe you owe me something." Mitchell looked up at her with obvious reluctance, clearly hoping to avoid the public apology he had agreed to in their bet. "The bet was 80%, Elena reminded him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I scored 98%. In front of witnesses." The entire class was watching now, waiting to see whether Mitchell would honor his agreement or try to find some way to escape the consequences of his misjudgment. Sergeant Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of official authority. Cadet Mitchell, I believe you made a public agreement regarding Cadet Salvador's performance. The entire class witnessed that agreement. Mitchell's face was red with embarrassment and anger, but he was trapped by his own words and the presence of Academy leadership. Mitchell began, then stopped, clearly struggling with the magnitude of his miscalculation. Elena felt a moment of unexpected sympathy for him, but she also understood that this moment was about more than personal vindication. It was about establishing that competence and determination could overcome prejudice and dismissal. The apology you owe me, Elena said quietly, isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been written off because they didn't fit someone else's expectations. Mitchell looked around at the faces surrounding him, classmates, instructors, administrators, all waiting for his response to a situation he had created and never expected to lose. Mitchell said again, his voice barely audible. I was wrong about you, Salvador. I apologize. Elena nodded, accepting the apology, but knowing that the real vindication wasn't in Mitchell's words. It was in the 98% score that no one could dispute or explain away. As the class dispersed and other cadets began their qualification attempts, Detective Chun approached Elena with a smile that conveyed more pride than any words could express. How does it feel? Chun asked. Elena looked at the targets that documented her transformation from academy failure to exceptional performer, then at the faces of classmates and instructors who would never again question her capabilities. It feels like I finally found out who I really am, Elena replied. And for the first time since beginning the academy, Elena Salvador knew that she belonged exactly where she was, 6 months after her academy graduation. Officer Elena Salvador stood in the advanced training center where Detective Chun had first shown her what she was truly capable of achieving. But this time, she wasn't there as a struggling cadet seeking remedial instruction. She was there as the department's newest tactical firearms instructor, preparing to teach other officers the same principles that had transformed her from the academy's biggest failure into its most remarkable success story. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who had once been dismissed as spray and pray girl was now responsible for training experienced officers in precision marksmanship and tactical decision-making. Ready for your final instructor certification? Detective Chun asked, as she entered the training facility carrying the familiar equipment bags that had become such an important part of Elena's journey. Elena smiled, checking her gear one last time. I've been ready for this since the day you told me that being underestimated could be my greatest advantage. The instructor certification required Elena to demonstrate not just exceptional shooting ability, but the capacity to teach those skills to others under pressure. It was the final step in a transformation that had begun with her desperate phone call to Chun just months earlier. Your test scenario today is based on a real incident from last month, Chun explained as she activated the advanced simulation system. Officer down, multiple threats, civilian hostages, and you have to guide other officers through tactical responses while maintaining precision fire yourself. Elena nodded, understanding that this was more than just a certification exam. This was proof that her journey from struggling cadet to elite instructor was complete and irreversible. The scenario began with Elena positioned as the senior officer at a complex tactical situation. Around her, other officers played by experienced tactical team members waited for her guidance while computerized threats and civilian targets appeared throughout the simulation environment. Alpha Team, take position on the east entrance, Elena commanded, her voice carrying the natural authority she had discovered during her academy confrontation with the administrators. Bravo Team, secure the south exit. Nobody moves until I give the signal. Elena assessed the tactical situation with the same analytical precision she had once applied to ballistics calculations in her previous career. The difference was that now she could combine that intellectual understanding with the practical skills needed to execute under pressure. Contact left. Came a call from one of the participating officers as a threat target appeared in the simulation. Hold position, Elena responded. Civilian too close for safe engagement. Wait for clear separation. Elena moved through the scenario with confidence that would have been unimaginable during her academy struggles. When threats appeared, she engaged them with precision that had become second nature. When split-second decisions were required, she made them without hesitation, but it was her teaching ability that truly set her apart. As the scenario progressed, Elena guided other officers through complex tactical problems, helping them understand not just what to do, but why specific techniques worked in specific situations. Remember, she called out to an officer struggling with a difficult shot, don't force the academy stance if it doesn't fit your body mechanics. Find your natural position and work from there. The advice was exactly what Detective Chun had given Elena months earlier, but hearing it in Elena's voice as she taught another struggling officer made it clear how completely she had internalized and mastered the principles that had once seemed impossible. When the scenario finally ended, Elena had achieved something that made even her 98% academy qualification seem modest by comparison. Perfect threat elimination, 0 civilian casualties, flawless tactical coordination, and most importantly, successful teaching under extreme pressure. Final score, the electronic system announced. 100% accuracy, perfect tactical assessment, exemplary leadership performance. Elena felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had not just mastered the skills that had once eluded her, she had become capable of teaching those skills to others who faced similar challenges. Detective Chien approached with an expression of pride that needed no words. Congratulations, Instructor Salvador. You're officially certified to train our tactical units. Instructor Salvador, Elena repeated, savoring the title that represented the completion of her transformation. I like the sound of that. As they secured their equipment, Chun reflected on the journey they had shared. You know, Elena, when Harrison first asked me to work with you, I thought we'd be lucky to get you to passing scores. I never imagined you'd become one of the department's most effective instructors. Elena paused in her equipment check, thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. Detective, can I ask you something I've wondered about for months? Of course. That first night when you agreed to train me, did you really believe I could turn things around, or were you just being kind to someone who was obviously failing? Chun smiled, but her expression became thoughtful. Honestly, I wasn't sure about your shooting potential, but I was absolutely certain about your intelligence, your determination, and your integrity. I figured if we could solve the technical problems, everything else would follow. Elena nodded, understanding now that Chun's confidence had been based on recognizing qualities that Elena herself hadn't known she possessed. But Elena, Chun continued, what you've accomplished goes beyond what I thought was possible. You didn't just learn to shoot competently, you became exceptional. You didn't just overcome your challenges, you turned them into strengths. As they left the training facility, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been on the verge of dismissal from the academy, mocked by her classmates and considered a hopeless case by her instructors. Now she was preparing to take on one of the department's most prestigious assignments as a tactical instructor. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Maria Santos, her former academy classmate who had become a close friend and supporter during Elena's struggles. Heard about your instructor certification. Proud of you, and not surprised. Coffee later to celebrate? Elena smiled as she typed her response. Santos had been one of the few people who had supported her during the darkest period of her academy training, and sharing this achievement with Her felt important. As Elena drove back to the main police station, she passed the academy where her transformation had begun. She could see current cadets on the outdoor training grounds, going through the same exercises that had once seemed impossible to her. At the next red light, Elena's phone rang. The caller ID showed Sergeant Harrison's name. "Salvador," she answered. Still getting used to using her last name in the professional manner she had learned from Detective Chun. "Elena, congratulations on your instructor certification. I just got the call from Chun. Thank you, Sergeant. I couldn't have done it without the foundation you gave me at the academy." There was a pause before Harrison responded. "Elena, I owe you an apology. Looking back at your academy training, I realize I focused so much on your shooting problems that I missed your potential in other areas. I should have recognized your strengths earlier and found better ways to address your challenges." Elena felt a surge of appreciation for Harrison's honesty. "Sergeant, you helped me in the most important way possible. You didn't give up on me when everyone else wanted to. That mattered more than you know." "Well," Harrison said, "I have a favor to ask. We have a new group of cadets starting next month, and several of them are struggling with marksmanship. Would you be willing to do some guest instruction at the academy?" Elena felt a deep sense of completion in the request. Returning to the academy as an instructor rather than a struggling student would represent the final step in her transformation. "I'd be honored, Sergeant. I know exactly how those cadets are feeling, and I think I can help them." As Elena continued toward the station, she thought about the cadets she would soon be teaching. Some of them were probably experiencing the same frustration, self-doubt, and humiliation that had nearly ended her own career before it began. But now she could offer them something she wished she had received during her own struggles: instruction from someone who understood both the technical challenges of marksmanship and the psychological barriers that could make those challenges seem insurmountable. Elena pulled into the police station parking lot and saw her reflection in the rearview mirror. The anxious, uncertain cadet who had once sat in this same parking lot, dreading another day of failure, was gone. In her place was a confident, competent officer who had proven that determination and proper training could overcome any obstacle. Her badge read Officer Salvador, but her new assignment would add tactical instructor to her official duties. More importantly, she would always carry the unofficial title she had earned through her journey, the officer who proved that being underestimated was sometimes the first step toward becoming exceptional. As Elena walked toward the station entrance, she thought about the phone call she would make later that evening to Detective Chen. She wanted to share the news about Harrison's request and discuss the training program she was already planning for struggling cadets. But first, she had one more call to make. Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she had saved months earlier but never used. Brad Mitchell. Mitchell had completed the academy and was now working patrol in a different district. Their paths rarely crossed, but Elena had heard through department channels that he had become a competent, if unremarkable, officer. She typed a brief message. "Heard you made a good arrest last week. Proud to serve alongside you." Elena, it wasn't an olive branch exactly, but it was acknowledgement that their academy conflict belonged in the past. Elena had proven everything she needed to prove, and Mitchell's opinion no longer had any power over her sense of self-worth. As Elena entered the police station, she passed a bulletin board where department announcements were posted. At the top of the board was a memo about her instructor certification, noting that Officer Elena Salvador had achieved the highest scores in departmental history and would be joining the Tactical Training Division. Elena smiled as she read the announcement. It made no mention of her academy struggles, her early failures, or the nickname that had once defined her in the minds of her classmates. Her official record now showed only achievement, competence, and exceptional performance. But Elena would never forget where she had started or the journey that had brought her to this moment. The memory of being called Spray and Pray Girl would always remind her that anyone could overcome their circumstances if they refused to accept other people's limitations. As she headed toward her new office in the Tactical Training Division, Alina Salvador knew that her story was far from over. She was no longer the cadet fighting to prove she belonged. She was the instructor who would help others discover their own potential, and that, she reflected, was exactly where she was meant to be. The woman who had once been dismissed as hopeless had achieved the impossible, 100% accuracy not just in marksmanship, but in proving that determination, proper guidance, and refusal to accept failure could transform anyone from their lowest point to their highest potential. Alina Salvador had become exactly who she was always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.